Okay, Tia, your first day in the books. I want you to talk to Sydney and I and the audience about what some of the precautions you have to take to return to school post COVID-19 are, and without sparing how that felt, all these different things that your school had to put in place to make sure everyone was safe.
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing is to mention is that what we thought was going to happen today and what actually happened today are very different. Because, of course, we're under a lot of pressure from the government to make sure that we are following everything that we should be following in order to be open and stay open. So there's, people coming and checking and making sure we're doing the right things and that we're following all the proper protocol. So we have been having over the last few weeks tons of emails and meetings and things like that about what needs to happen. So essentially what happens is when you come in the morning, your temperature is taken. If you get on a bus, you get your temperature taken before you even get onto the bus. Then when the kids get to school, they come to the classrooms, they all have to sanitize before they get into the classrooms, which they were all doing. The classroom was broken up, so usually, of course, we're sitting in groups and that kind of thing. Now they're sitting a meter apart, very kind of Victorian style in rows, and everybody has wipes and hand sanitizers and masks, and so the kids have that on. Thankfully, today, actually, we found out that the government has relaxed the requirements for the masks. And so we found out about 10:30 this morning that we didn't have to have them on completely all the time and that we could, pull them down, or if we were distancing from the children that we could have that. So, of course, when we're in the classroom, that looks a little different. So I was just trying to keep the kids in their chairs. And then I said, okay, but if you're getting up to go and talk to somebody, or you're getting up to walk around the room, you got to put it back on. So we're just trying to sort that out right now. Just trying to figure out how to make that a habit, because the kids will say, well, I forgot that I had to put it back on. I'm like, yeah, but you got to make sure it's on. So thankfully we are allowed to have the heaters on, because a lot of places the heaters are not allowed to be on. And we also have to do temperature checks at lunchtime. That has to be recorded. At the beginning of the day, actually, I forgot to mention that we need to fill out a form declaring both ourselves healthy and our temperature, as well as the people in our household. So that presents a bit of a problem for people who perhaps work in different schools, or with some of my parents, where one parent works out of the city and then comes back, and that creates kind of a different problem, because they have to report to the school that they've been out of country, or excuse me, out of the city, because depending on where you go, everyone gets a QR code. So our, kind of like your Apple Pay, we have Alipay, and Alipay has a function on it that has a health code. So you put all your information in, your flight dates from whenever you last left the country, and it brings up this green code if you're lucky, and you get the green code. That means you can get into places. If you get a yellow or a red code, or I've heard that if you get too close to someone who has a red, or too close to someone who has a yellow, that could potentially influence yours. I'm not entirely sure if that's true. And so if you go to a particular area that is more under restrictions, that could change your code. So that code is used to get into not only, restaurants and bars and places around the city, but also you want to make sure you have that for school. So you don't have to use it at school now, because you have all the forms and everyone's been in the country for more than 14 days. So mostly people are fine. But you do have to declare your family, people in your household, as well as yourself and your health situation. So lunchtime was in our classroom as well. I noticed the cafeteria today, they had all these huge plastic dividers, so that if you were going to eat in the cafeteria, which the little kids aren't at this point, it's this plastic thing that splits the tables up, so that you're kind of in your own little plastic cubicle if you were going to eat lunch in the cafeteria. So our kids are eating in the classroom, and so every day, 2-3 times a day, we're meant to wipe down all the tables and make sure that everybody's got hand sanitized and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of funny today, because one of my students came up to me and said, Mrs. Luker-Putra, I have an allergy to something and I might sneeze. And so and he just kind of trailed off. I said, are you afraid people are going to freak out if you sneeze? And he goes, yeah. Like, okay, so I stopped the whole class. I said, I want you to know. And then of course, I have that too. Me too. I sneeze too. So it turned out to be fine. But the kids are really, really acutely aware of what's going on. And so they were really good. You know, when they'd see a place where they have the lines set up a meter apart, they stood on the lines. And I mean, it's not as doomsday as I thought it was going to be.
Sydney, what's your response to hearing all this as an administrator and just having Tia walk through the stuff that's just impacting Tia specifically as a teacher? Like, what are you thinking as you hear this?
Sure. Tia, you should know I took the liberty of sharing your blog with my SLT. I particularly like the little joke you put in there about the carpets. But you know,
I saw that too.
You know, the takeaway from, and I read another blog post about a primary school opening in Finland and how they've been dealing with children coming back to school. And the thing that I took away from it is, you know, we're good on the big picture planning. We've got the foresight, and we're thinking of all the big things we need to do, and, you know, the systems we need to put in place, and, you know, the physical distancing of kids. But it's the small things that you least expect that can make such a huge difference, like high fives or sharing food, or, you know, exchanging books during a group activity, you know, and that's been the biggest takeaway I've had from both Tia's blog as well as the other one I mentioned, because when we talked about it this morning with the senior leaders, we discussed at length, you know, what are all the small things that children take for granted. Like, our kindergartners are very famous for their high fives and hugs every morning. And that's how they welcome each other into class. And that's just something they naturally do. Or a teacher would be so, you know, wouldn't think twice before holding on to one of them if they were hurt or crying or upset or something like that. And it's all those little things that I realize are going to make the biggest difference to a healthy environment, as well as to how children feel about their school experience, because, you know, they're so used to being treated a certain way and being, you know, having freedom and autonomy to do things the way they feel. And now that's all going to change to some extent or completely. And it's those small things that we can't think of, you know, enough, that's probably going to be the most important. So that's been my biggest takeaway from both of those blogs.
There was someone else who tweeted a couple of days ago, like having to rethink everything, meaning like the fire drill. Like, you know, that we have a procedure that's really tight and well rehearsed when we have a fire drill or when we're evacuating. And that is not involving distancing. It's kids in a very tightly packed line, quickly and safely and quietly getting out of the building. So there are all of these things that have to get modified and retaught. And to the idea around modification, the biggest challenge that I've had as a school leader is figuring out how to best support our students. As in UAE, students with special needs or with disabilities, we refer to as students of determination. I love that. But it's about how are we supporting them with this online learning? Our original plan before the lockdown happens was we don't have many that are in a self-contained environment, like a self-contained support environment. So we were just going to send the teacher to the home and just have them spend time with them each day and rotate through. That got nixed. So being able to get those kids serviced again, I'm really excited about, and making sure that they're getting what they need. But yeah, it's all the little things that you have to rethink. And so I'm really looking forward to the next blog, Tia. It'll be shared with my SLT in our SLT meeting tomorrow, but I hope that you continue to document your experience, because you are on the front end for all of us. You know, you're weeks, if not months ahead. Tia, anything that you want to say before we wrap up? And Sydney, I'm going to give you the opportunity to say the same thing, just about your experience in China and what it's been like for you and what you've taken away from the whole COVID-19 experience.
That is a big question.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to drop that on you.
I think the most important thing is for people to reach out, to be honest about how they're feeling, consider mental health. That's really important. That's something I've learned a lot about the last couple of months. And, you know, just taking time to breathe and share. And, you know, it's not as bad as you think it's going to be, because all of this, I wasn't afraid about going back to school until I got the thousands of documents from my school saying this, and this. And that freaked me out. Even, my wife, her school, she got all of the information. She went, oh my God, why are we going back to school? But then you go back to school and it's actually kind of just the same. There's some new things and some stuff that you have to do, but essentially the heart of why you're there is the students, and they're still kids. They're still there. They still want to learn. And so really it's the best part is that I get to go back to that. So, don't be afraid, because, the schools have to set up all of these requirements and meet all of the strict, the restrictions and all of that. But at the end of the day, you're going to go back to your kids and teaching, and, much better than being on Zoom.
Yep. I say amen to that. And one of the things that struck me in what you said is it's got to be easier to move school back in the building than it was to move school out of the building in the first place. I have to believe that the quick work that all of us did collectively as a people to make school happen without a physical space has to be more difficult and more time consuming than the work of starting to get back to what we're accustomed to. Sydney, your thoughts before we wrap up tonight?
So I just want to preface this by saying, 100%, the entire pandemic has been adverse on so many families, and it's been terrible to go through. And I'm sure the degree to which people have experienced it has been, tremendously different, and it's different for everybody. But having said that, I think to your point on being positive in every situation, I think it's allowed us the vantage point to really reflect and look at what's working and what's not working, and what the next few years are going to look like, and to question if we are ready for it. I mean, just simple things like, for example, the use of technology. We had it, not everybody enjoyed it. We have the early adopters, and you have the people who are naysayers, and suddenly you're thrust into a situation where overnight everybody has to adapt, and not just adapt, but over the last 10 weeks get better at it if they want to sustain, the practices that they've got going. So I think it's allowed us the vantage point to really think about how we do things, and question why we do things. Some of the things we do are unnecessary. A lot of our meetings and our conversations could be done differently. The very fact that we're not traveling to work and not meeting physically, but doing these things remotely, is a voice for flexibility and change in how we function as teams. So I think it has given us that chance to think about it. And I think anybody who doesn't see value in having this time is not looking at it the right way. So the lens through which we can see what we do is definitely clearer now because of the time we've had to think about it.
Thank you for that. Tia Luker-Putra, Sydney Atkins, thank you so much for, and I swear I was going to nail it in this last one, Tia. I had it all queued up in my mind and I just blew it. But I'm going to get it. For our next time we record, we're going to be good to go. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I will put your Twitter handles in the show notes so people can, and I'll put, Tia, your blog in the show notes, this last one that you wrote and the one you wrote before, so people can read those things in detail. We'll have 2 episodes coming up this week. I'm really excited. Next Monday night, I'm going to be doing our first The Parents Tell All. It's almost like a bachelorette style parent tell all. So it's going to be parents talking about their teaching experiences. Some are educators, some are not. My friend June is Korean American, and her son and her live in Belgium. So all of the online learning was in Belgian, and that was so I can't wait for her to share. So The Parents Tell All will come next Monday, and then a couple days later, I won't be doing this live, but I'll be recording a special episode with Daniel. We're going to be talking, and he's at Alien Earbud, and we're going to be talking about Michael Jordan, The Last Dance. Was he a good leader? I have a lot of takes on this, and I'm looking forward to talking about how his tactics would have transferred into different industries. And we are both from Chicago, Daniel and I both, so we're really looking forward to getting into this. So that's it for now. Thank you as always for your listens, your views, your retweets. For now, you guys are all officially dismissed.